Look carefully into that darkness. Do you think it is just a bush? No, that is a 300-pound killing machine watching us. In Texas, wild hogs are no longer just animals. They're an invading army. We gave them a name, the Ghost Sounder. For the past 6 months, they have stayed invisible to every trap we set, destroying dozens of acres of cornfields before vanishing like spirits into the night. Tonight, the battle between human intelligence and the survival instincts of these beasts will finally be decided. You will not want to look away, because one wrong breath, one mistimed move, and the entire operation collapses. The biggest mistake amateur hunters make is impatience. With a ghost sounder, a steel trap is nothing more than a warning sign. So we used psychological warfare instead, feeding their complacency. For the last 5 days, we have scattered fermented corn, the most addictive scent imaginable, directly at the trap entrances without dropping the gates. At trap point number 1, the piglets are already inside. At point number 3, the lone boars are growling suspiciously. You can see it right now on the main screen. Live signals from multiple surveillance cameras streaming directly into my phone. The difficult part is not trapping the hogs. The difficult part is patience. We have to wait until the pigs at the farthest point move completely inside. If I hit the trigger too early at point number 2, the crash of steel and the alarm squeals will echo for miles, warning every remaining hog nearby. Right now, we are balancing everything on the edge of a single synchronized strike. Inside the truck cabin, the air feels heavy. Nobody is breathing. We are waiting for one final signal. 3 a.m. Everything is ready. Look at the screen. Point 1 ready. Point 2 ready. Point 4. The massive alpha boar has finally crossed the red line. Our fingers rest on the trigger buttons. This is the moment we have waited for. 3, 2, 1. Drop them. We got them. Look at this. It sounds like a steel earthquake. At trap number 2, 15 hogs are thrashing wildly, desperate to escape. At trap number 5, the giant boar is completely locked down. An unbelievable sight unfolds. Multiple traps crashing shut almost simultaneously, turning the Texas night into one enormous cage, trapping the invaders, destroying these farms. We did not give them even a single second to react. The traps have fallen, but the real battle is only beginning. Deep in the darkness, we now have to secure the first 3 trap locations. There is no sunlight, only headlights and weak flashlight beams cutting through the night. We have been moving non-stop, racing against time to control the beasts raging inside the steel cages. The piercing screams of the hogs echo across the fields together with the violent rattling of chains. This work demands absolute concentration. One small mistake in the darkness could lead to disastrous consequences. 3 traps, dozens of targets, and not a single second to stop moving. When the first rays of sunlight break through the Texas fog, the second battlefield reveals itself. The remaining 3 traps are waiting under daylight. Now the true scale of the operation finally becomes visible. The giant hogs are no longer vague shadows in the dark. They are massive walls of muscle, living proof of the destruction they caused. Under the morning sun, we continue transporting them out. The exhaustion from a sleepless night seems to disappear the moment we see the results of the operation. 3 night traps, 3 daytime traps, a perfectly sealed encirclement.
It didn't begin in the fields or at the forest edge. It began right inside the working heart of the farm. A herd of wild boars appeared in the very spaces where people carry out their daily lives. What they left behind were overturned tables and chairs, damaged equipment, and a workplace thrown into chaos. And when wild boars grow so accustomed that every time they appear, they walk straight into human workspaces, this is no longer a story about crops. It is a clear sign that the control system has reacted more slowly than the boar's ability to adapt. The moment had come for us, those entrusted with protecting the peace of this land, to act decisively. Shall we go then? The most common mistake in wild boar management is not a lack of tools, but poor timing and flawed execution. Set a trap along the wrong route, trigger it too early, or let even a single animal escape, and the entire herd will remember what happened. From that moment on, they grow more alert, alter their movement patterns, and become willing to push deeper into human spaces. When this happens, any reaction driven by impulse or emotion risks pushing the situation completely out of control. In this situation, the goal is not to chase the animals away, certainly not to cause panic. The top priority is to stop the herd from continuing to access the work area, prevent them from scattering in multiple directions, and avoid creating additional risks for people. The chosen solution is a large coral-style trap integrated with a remote monitoring camera system. This tool allows decisions to be made based on real data, not guesswork. The camera clearly identifies the size of the herd, their approach routes, and the exact moment when the boars are least alert. In wildlife control, accurate information is just as important as the trap itself. Automatic cameras are positioned along multiple approach routes around the trap, covering the entire movement zone of the boar herd. This setup is not about catching more animals. It is about minimizing risk to people. Every decision is based on real-time visual evidence, with no guesswork and no rushed reactions. Only when the entire herd is fully within the safe control zone is the system activated. When the cameras confirm that the entire herd is inside the trap, the system is activated remotely. The automatic drop mechanism seals all exits in an instant, containing the herd within a closed, fully controllable space. No individual panics and escapes. No movement spills over into areas where people live and work. The risk is stopped exactly at the point of intrusion. This is the fundamental difference between technology-based control and traditional manual methods. Instead of relying on a single trap, the system is deployed across multiple strategic points, known travel routes, areas near food sources, and access points close to farm structures. This approach prevents the herd from scattering in multiple directions, reduces pressure on any single trap, and increases overall control of the entire area. It is a long-term control strategy, well suited to farm environments where people live and work on a daily basis.
They're looking.
A single small mistake in trap placement can turn a controlled situation into a serious threat to the entire farm. Once wild boars cross into restricted areas, what matters most is not reacting the fastest, but reacting with precision. Technology, timing, and disciplined decision-making allow risks to be contained responsibly, before people are forced to pay a heavy price. This is not just about controlling wild boars, it is about protecting safety, order, and the daily rhythm of an entire community, effectively and without unnecessary strain on human effort. When wild boars begin to destroy, warning signs and how to trap them immediately. No one expects that after just one night, the whole field would turn into a wasteland, torn apart and devastated. Newly rooted crops are overturned, mud splattered everywhere, and fences are bent as if they've just taken a brutal hit. This is a clear sign that the wild boars have returned in packs and are expanding their territory. When the damage exceeds the ability of farmers to repair it, the issue no longer becomes about temporary scares. It's about making the right decision from the very first sign. And that's when our team quickly deployed the wild boar control plan. Through team discussions and planning, we realized that in order to solve the problem at its root, we needed to understand the creatures we were dealing with. Drawing from our experience in controlling wild boars in the US, where the species is considered an invasive threat causing severe damage, one principle is always at the forefront. Never go against the natural structure and behavior of the herd. Wild boars feel safest when moving in groups. They avoid anything that could separate the herd or force them into making sudden, stressful decisions. If one individual encounters danger, the entire herd will remember the area and change their route in subsequent visits. For this reason, small, disjointed measures often fail to resolve the issue and can make future control efforts even harder. Trap number 6 was selected due to its open space, curved structure that surrounds the herd's familiar route, allowing them to enter without feeling cornered. Rather than applying pressure, this trap serves as a tool to gently guide their behavior, leading them into a controlled area in the most natural way possible. Trap number 6 wasn't chosen for its strength, but for its ability to intervene early, before the herd can adjust its behavior. This is a long-term control strategy that minimizes the risk of the wild boars learning to avoid traps and returning with even greater destructive force. The trap is set along a predetermined path to minimize changes to the surrounding environment. The trap frames are securely fixed and camouflaged to blend in with the natural surroundings, preventing any foreign elements that might alert the herd. The bait is arranged in layers, not to lure, but to create a familiar and safe atmosphere. The entire process is focused on stability, as even a single hasty action could cause the herd to change its behavior. Wild boars are highly cautious. In the first few nights, the herd only approaches and then retreats. This is their natural risk assessment process. Without any signs of force or pressure, the boars gradually move deeper into the trap area, following their usual routine. Only when the entire herd is inside in its natural state is the intervention triggered. The trap mechanism activates smoothly, safely controlling the entire herd without causing chaos or posing any danger to humans or the surrounding area. Controlling a herd doesn't mean the risk is eliminated. Other herds will continue to scout the area from different directions. However, with the traps already set up and working in sync, subsequent interventions become more proactive and effective. Over time, the area begins to form a risk awareness for the wild boars. They no longer see it as a safe zone to return to, which significantly reduces the likelihood of repeated destruction. Wild boar control is not a hasty action, but a process that requires observation, understanding of behavior, and making the right decision at the right time. Trap number 6 isn't just a tool, it's a testament to responsible management, balancing production, community safety, and the ecosystem. In this silent confrontation, success doesn't come from rushing, it comes from patience, knowledge, and the ability to guide behavior rather than facing it head on. In wild boar management, true victory doesn't lie in how many boars you catch, but in preventing damage from happening in the first place.
I've lived in Columbus, Georgia for more than 20 years, and I never thought there would come a day when I'd have to guard my farm like a battlefield. Everything started with just a few strange tracks in the field. I ignored them until the next morning when the entire crop was torn apart as if a storm had ripped through overnight. Then they came back, not one, but an entire herd of wild hogs. They smashed fences, tore up the soil, and trampled the harvest I'd spent months caring for. And I realized one thing: if I didn't stop them right now, I was going to lose everything. The first traps were set right along the forest edge, where the hogs usually poured out each night. Not placed randomly, not done in haste. Every location was carefully studied, based on the herd's familiar travel routes. But trapping only at the edge was not enough. Deeper inside the forest, more zones began to be secured as well. Transit points, trails, resting spots, feeding grounds, all of it was gradually brought into the control system. A network was taking shape. We split into teams. Each person was given a role. Everything moved quickly. Once the traps were in place, technology entered the operation. Motion sensor cameras were installed. Automatic target recognition systems recorded every animal that appeared. Every movement was tracked. Every time the herd returned, we had data. No more guessing. No more passive reactions. Everything now was under our control. And after a period of monitoring, we kept bait inside while the trapdoors remained open, watching everything through our devices. When the moment came and the whole herd naturally gathered inside to feed, I looked at my father and knew everything was ready. The decisive moment had arrived. Just one button. The enclosed system activated instantly. Escape routes were blocked almost at the same time. No gaps, no way back. Bang! The drop gate slammed shut with incredible speed. Inside, the wild hogs immediately fell into panic. They scattered, spun in circles, searched every direction for a way out. But every path led to the same ending. A closed circle, no matter how intelligent they were. They gradually lost all sense of direction. Within minutes, the resistance began to fade. No more desperate charges. No more clear attempts to escape. The entire herd was contained inside the trap system. It was over. I looked at my father, and everyone there let out a breath of relief. That same night, reports came in from every other trap we had placed. They had all been triggered, capturing many more targets waiting for their chance to destroy farms and neighborhoods. No one needed to say anything, but everyone understood. After that night, the whole community would finally sleep in peace, no longer fearing their crops would be ruined again. But the most important thing was never the trap. It was the way the community chose to act. The individuals causing the greatest damage were selected first and dealt with through humane, swift, and carefully controlled methods. No chaos, no extremism, just responsible action to avoid unnecessary panic for the animals while bringing real economic relief to local families. This approach was never about wiping them out entirely, but about reducing risk while still respecting ecological balance. And it was true. After that night, silence returned. No more tangled tracks every morning. No more torn up soil after every dark night. But what truly changed was the way people faced the problem. No more rushed reactions. No more isolated efforts. Instead, observe, understand, then act at the right moment. Because in situations like this, the most important decision is not how fast you act, is whether you have enough patience to wait for the right time. I have witnessed wild boars invading and destroying crops on the farm many times. This has repeated itself season after season. And this time, I wasn't going to let it happen again. I am the farm manager, the one directly responsible for this area. If we can't stop the wild boars, then all the team's effort will be for nothing. So we decided to set traps to put an end to the destruction caused by these feral animals. That night, I set up 2 cage traps in 2 different areas around the farm. One was placed right at the edge of the forest, where footprints and signs of rooting damage frequently appear. The other was set along a narrow trail leading out to the field, a route they often used to forage at night. Everything was carefully prepared, from the bait to the trigger mechanism. After a final check, I left and relied entirely on the surveillance camera in the darkness. The next morning, the first thing I did was review the footage. What I saw surprised me. At the first trap, around midnight, 3 adult wild boars appeared. They moved very cautiously, constantly sniffing around the cage. After a few minutes of inspecting, one of them stepped inside to eat the bait. The moment it moved deep enough in, the door slammed shut instantly. The other 2 panicked and immediately ran back into the forest. Switching to the second trap, things happened much faster. Only 1 boar appeared, but it seemed far less cautious. Almost immediately, it walked straight into the cage, and the trap snapped shut within seconds. No hesitation, no chance to escape. After watching the entire recording, I immediately gathered my tools and got into the pickup truck to check the site. As I approached, I could already hear loud banging coming from inside the trap. The boar in the first cage was still very strong, repeatedly ramming into the metal bars, trying to break free. It was larger than I had expected, and clearly, handling it would not be simple. I approached carefully, keeping a safe distance before securing the cage to prevent it from tipping over or being damaged. Once everything was stabilized, I moved to the second trap. The boar there was just as aggressive, but the tighter space made it harder for it to move compared to the first one. The next step was loading both cages onto the truck. This was the most time-consuming and physically demanding part. With the heavy weight of the boars and the steel cages, I had to use ropes and even the truck's power to pull them up onto the bed. Every move had to be calculated carefully. One small mistake could lead to injury or a broken trap. After securing both cages firmly on the truck, I quickly left the area and returned to the farm. After dealing with the 2 traps from the previous night, I didn't stop. Signs of wild boars were still present around the area, especially in the orchard behind the farm and a low-lying patch not far from there. This time, I decided to set 2 more traps, but during the daytime when they would be less suspicious. The first trap was placed right in the fruit orchard. This is where wild boars often come to dig and destroy, especially when the fruit begins to ripen. The second trap was a completely different situation. I brought it to a low-lying area where water collects, creating a muddy, damp terrain. This is a place wild boars frequently visit to find water and cool themselves. By late afternoon, everything was ready. I left and waited for the results. Clearly, the number of wild boars in this area is not small, and what I had just seen was only part of the problem. By daylight, this field may still look normal. But after just one night, by the next morning, the soil has been torn apart in patches, roots ripped upward, empty spaces left behind as if something passed through and swept away every ounce of hard work. What worries them is not only the scale of destruction, but the fact that it returns almost every night, consistent, relentless, and unpredictable. And that is the sign that if no action is taken in time, an entire harvest could disappear. That is exactly why our team is here again, to install traps strong enough and solid enough to hold the line. Without wasting time, we completed the first net trap that same day on the southern edge of the forest. Before long, it gave its first signal. One boar had been caught inside, but instead of staying contained, it reacted violently, charging straight into the netted gate again and again. The mesh stretched tight, shaking wildly with every impact. The decision was made immediately after that. We would not dismantle the old trap, but we would no longer rely on this type of system. At once, on the northern side of the forest, where the terrain was tighter and more enclosed, a different setup was built, a steel door trap. Heavier frame, stronger locks, a gravity drop gate that did not depend on tension like netting. It only needed to be strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a herd of wild boars. When everything was ready, we waited in silence for nightfall. The tension in the air was so thick that no one said a word. Then the first movement appeared. The smell of bait quickly drew in the herd. And when the moment came, when every last one had stepped inside, click, the trigger was activated. The gate dropped shut. Inside, several boars reacted instantly. They burst into frantic motion, searching for an escape. But every direction was sealed. Metal rang out in sharp beats. Short, clean, final. We looked at one another. For the first time, the trap had worked exactly as intended. At another point near the forest edge, the reinforced trap set by Tom did not take long to activate either. Though it caught only a few, it would still reduce the damage to this season's crops to the local farmers. Once the trap was sprung, the boars tried to escape by instinct. But that was impossible. They had been fully contained inside the solid structure we had spent so much effort preparing. And did not stop there. Texas is home to more than 3 million feral hogs. So together with landowners, we often place traps like these out in the fields. The trap in this area became another hotspot, stirring up noise at the edge of the woods. When large, powerful boars were found contained inside, it proved one thing clearly. The system was working exactly as we had planned. Every time a trap was triggered, we did not rush to celebrate. But at the very least, everyone felt a little more at ease. The traps continued to be reinforced. We continued the control operation. This time, we were determined to catch every last one, to leave them no chance to damage this area again. Every year, our state of Texas alone suffers around $400, $500 million in economic losses caused by wild hogs. This final night was considered the decisive one. Once again, we took our positions, held our breath, and waited. At the first trap, the herd had grown larger. Not only adults, but smaller ones as well entered the enclosure. The space inside began to tighten. Then, at the perfect moment, the trap let out a chilling clack. Instantly, movement inside became faster, more violent, more desperate. Heavy blows slammed into the steel frame. Metal rang out sharply. Others circled and shoved. The entire trap shook in waves. But this time, just like the night before, not a single one escaped. We kept watching, kept waiting, and then, everything reached its peak. A massive herd appeared, not scattered individuals anymore, but a dense, moving flood. They fed greedily on the bait scattered across the ground until BM, the gate crashed down. At once, the trap exploded with noise inside. Feet pounding the dirt, steel bars rattling without pause. And in that moment, we understood more clearly than ever. If the trap system had not been strong enough, everything would have burst apart. The next morning, we did not dismantle the trap right away, because we knew there was still more out there, and we were right. Another large herd had been caught just before dawn. When we walked past, they became even more agitated. Several slammed into the steel frame so hard the entire trap shook repeatedly. And do you know what was inside that cage? The very reason those fields have been destroyed for weeks. As everything gradually came under control, the farm grew quiet again. No more fresh tracks each morning. No more furrows torn open after every night. This was not a hunt. This was the only way to save the harvest. Because once wild boars discover a stable food source, they do not stop on their own. In situations like this, what do you think matters more? A trap strong enough, or the patience to wait for the perfect moment? Leave your thoughts below. More than 150 pounds of rippling muscle, razor-sharp tusks, and a breeding speed far beyond control. We are slowly losing ground to wild boars if we keep relying on traditional trapping methods. As wildlife control managers in Texas, we bring a new control tool here. Soft, but impossible to break. But to capture an entire group of intelligent wild boars, old steel cages are no longer enough. We need a smarter strategy. A soft net trapping system called Pig Brig. The whole team moved immediately. Everyone had their role, working in perfect coordination. The heavy hammer strikes drove 7-foot steel stakes deep into the hard ground. The Pig Brig net was carefully suspended. Fermented corn bait was spread evenly from the outside toward the center. Sweat soaked through our protective clothing, but a perfect trap was finally ready. At a trap site near the forest edge, a large herd of boars had appeared. They were eagerly feeding on the fermented corn bait inside the net, completely unaware that they were already trapped. Outside, a few scout boars still stood back in the darkness, alert, watching, testing. They absolutely refused to step inside. The next morning, we drove to the site to inspect the overnight catch. Everything inside the trap became tense immediately. Every boar panicked and ran wildly the moment they saw human figures approaching. A full herd of wild boars of every size. Big ones, small ones. They charged continuously at the net walls. But it was useless. The Pig Brig net absorbed every impact. With no hard surface to push against, they quickly exhausted themselves, and everything was brought under control. The net trap had done its job perfectly, but the wild boars were still out there, and we could not allow ourselves to become careless. Noticing that the herd had started changing its travel route, I decided to establish a new trap point in an open grassy area between the forest and the farmland. During the first few days, we rolled the lower edge of the net upward. Bait was spread from the outside inward. This was the familiarization stage, allowing them to move freely in and out. When the camera reported back, an 80-pound scout boar stepped forward first. It sniffed around the net, carefully feeding outside the trap. The others stood farther away, watching. But eventually, the temptation of food won. Later, they finally pushed their snouts forward and slipped completely inside the net. The trap quietly closed without a single sound. Their survival instinct had been deceived by a design that felt too natural. The next morning, bright sunlight filled the sky. We approached the open field. The harsh sunlight made me squint, my chest pounding at the scene in front of me. Once again, chaos. A large herd of boars was desperately trying to escape. One huge boar, weighing no less than 120 pounds, pushed its front legs upward, trying to climb over the 7-foot net wall. Dust flew everywhere. They slammed continuously into the net walls. The entire area looked like it had been torn apart by pure panic. The following night, the clock showed nearly 9 p.m. The herd arrived. They pushed their snouts under the net close to the ground, fighting each other to get inside and reach the bait, only to become trapped almost immediately. The principle of the trap is one way: easy to enter, impossible to leave. But suddenly, my heartbeat sped up. I cursed quietly under my breath. One boar entering had accidentally exposed a small opening, and another immediately slipped backward and escaped. It happened in an instant. Nature always finds a way to punish the smallest mistakes, forcing us to be even more careful with every detail of the setup. The hardest mission waited at the final trap point. Last year, this entire area had been completely destroyed by wild boars. Not even a blade of grass remained. We patiently waited several more days for the boars to grow familiar with the presence of the net. When we finally saw signs that they had started entering the trap to feed, I lowered the net, but intentionally left a tiny part of the entrance slightly open. A psychological trap designed to lure the most stubborn ones deeper inside. The result finally came. After a long period of monitoring, we successfully captured a massive male boar weighing around 140 pounds. And when dawn arrived, my breathing grew heavier with every step forward. Inside the net, the giant male boar and its herd were crowded together in complete chaos, desperately trying to break free. They slammed into every corner, turned in circles, bit wildly at everything around them. The entire steel stake system shook violently under the force of their power. But every escape attempt became hopeless. The confinement had been established completely. Controlling wild boars is not about fighting muscle with muscle. It is a game of patience, reading tracks, and understanding animal behavior. When that knowledge is combined with smart tools, we do not just protect the farm's property. We complete the mission safely, professionally, and responsibly. What would you do when facing over 200 pounds of muscle charging wildly through the darkness? For us, that's just another day on the job in Mississippi. With the support of infrared cameras and specialized net traps, we move in to eliminate the threat before crops are destroyed. Hop in and follow us into the hotspot right now. We are specialists in a rapid response wild hog control team in the Mississippi Delta. In this region, wild hogs are an ecological disaster. They tear up levees, destroy crops, and carry disease. Every day, my job starts with reading the signs. Freshly churned mud, deep hoof prints in damp soil, or scattered corn trails. That's how we map their movement. Our goal isn't blind eradication. It's safe wild boar trapping, minimizing the risk of accidents for both people and livestock. Two 20-foot pig brig net trap systems are already in place. The moment the hogs sense human presence, panic erupts inside the trap. They slam violently into the net walls, trampling over each other in a desperate attempt to escape. Dust explodes into the air, mixing with sharp, piercing squeals. But the net flexes, absorbing every impact and keeping them contained. To achieve this, we had been calculating and preparing for days. This system demands absolute patience. On Thursday night, we set the trap in conditioning mode. The net was suspended high on 6-foot steel T-posts, with dozens of pounds of corn spread evenly below. The hogs fed freely without feeling threatened. A few days later, we switched to capture mode. The net was lowered. Everything was ready, but wild hogs are not easy to fool. Camera data came in just after 1 a.m. Tension built in my chest as I watched the herd circle the trap on my phone screen. They were smarter than expected. The entire group stayed outside, using their snouts to eat the bait around the edges. Not a single one stepped fully under the hanging net. That was the real test. If we lost patience and intervened, we'd lose everything. Nearly an hour later, the lead sow finally gave in to hunger. She lifted the edge of the net with her snout and slipped inside. The rest followed immediately. Success. The next morning, as we approached, the entire group was in chaos. Mud splattered across the net, hooves sliding violently across the soaked ground until we began restraining them one by one. Around 11 p.m., the camera showed a large boar slowly approaching a circular cage trap with a netted entrance. It was extremely cautious, feeding only at the edge, its body not fully inside. Finally, it stepped fully inside. The 200-pound mass stood still for a moment, confused, chewing corn as if it hadn't yet realized it was trapped. That night, we headed out again to another trap site near a livestock farm. We arrived on site. A teammate pointed quietly to a torn section of net. Earlier, a hog had escaped through that exact spot. We had patched it, but the backup clips weren't strong enough. Wild hogs have excellent memory. If this one found that weak point again, it could escape. We weren't taking that risk. A single decisive shot rang out. The threat was neutralized instantly. The next morning, we returned to clear the site. The hogs inside were still aggressive. Our muscles tensed as we tightened our grip on specialized catch poles. The loop snare tightened just enough to control each animal's resistance. Working in sync, we secured them one by one and loaded them efficiently onto the pickup truck. By early afternoon, the pickup stopped at the final trap site. The most destructive individuals in the area were here. Inside, they charged and slammed into the net in desperation. We continued processing them one by one. The job ended as the sun began to dip. Exhaustion set in, but the control operation was complete.
Hip, hip, get turned. Hip, hip, hip.
When the city falls asleep, another world begins to move. Under the dim glow of streetlights, herds of wild boars emerge. They quietly cross the streets, pushing deeper into residential areas. They tear up gardens, search for food, and roam freely through places once considered safe human spaces. Videos recorded by residents reveal a troubling shift. Wild boars no longer stop at the forest edge. They now appear on city streets, inside neighborhoods, even right in front of people's homes. When the boundary between urban life and wildlife becomes blurred, the issue is no longer just property damage. It becomes a matter of human safety. When wild animals lose their fear of humans, risk begins to grow exponentially. This is not just a story about wild boars. These images raise a much larger question. How are we managing the shared space between humans and nature? And how can we protect our way of life while still preserving the balance of the natural world? Follow us as we continue this challenging journey. From before dawn, Martin, one of the most respected wild boar hunters in the region, was already at the trap site he had set days earlier. More than just a skilled marksman, Martin is known in the local community as a pioneer in using smart trapping systems to control wildlife safely and responsibly. Today's mission posed a serious challenge, a highly alert sounder of wild boar, and the team's responsibility was not to injure them, but to guide them back toward the forest without harm. The core strategy was pre-baiting, allowing the boar to become familiar with the trap site before any activation. The team used fermented corn and sweet bait, since wild boar find almost impossible to resist. Over several days, the entire sounder grew accustomed to the location and the food source, significantly increasing trap effectiveness while minimizing stress and panic. When the trap is finally triggered, the likelihood of capturing the entire group at once, rather than scattering individuals, makes the operation safer, faster, and far more efficient. Effective control does not come from haste, but from staying one step ahead. Martin uses Boar Buster, a modern trapping system designed specifically for wild boar and now widely deployed across the United States. Unlike traditional methods, Boar Buster allows an entire sounder to be controlled with a single activation, minimizing panic and greatly reducing the risk of boars scattering into nearby residential areas. For Martin, operating a trap is never just a technical procedure. Each activation is a responsible decision, tied directly to maintaining ecological order and protecting the everyday safety of the community. Before triggering the system, Martin carefully checks every factor: the trap's placement, the direction from which the boar approach, and the most appropriate moment to activate. Thanks to the pre-baiting process, allowing the boar to become familiar with the trap site over several days, when the entire sounder arrives, the system can be triggered with precision, keeping stress and unnecessary risk to an absolute minimum. Once the boar are securely contained, the team relocates them to a legally designated management area, ensuring the operation remains safe, controlled, and does not disrupt nearby residents. This is where technology, field experience, and patience converge. No rushed reactions, no loss of control, only proactive intervention to prevent damage, protect the community, and preserve balance within the local ecosystem.
Let's go, hip. Let's go, hip, hip. Get in there, hip, hip. Hip, 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 hip. Yeah, we gotta screw that to the bottom.
The operation didn't just bring wild boar under control, it restored peace of mind to families and the wider community. In a world where wildlife is increasingly encroaching on residential areas, smart, humane, and properly licensed solutions are the path towards sustainable management. Wildlife management is not a battle between humans and nature. It is how modern society brings together science, law, and responsibility to protect both communities and ecosystems.